hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Ian Gibbs.
And this is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun is set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is bonus episode number 5. And we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about but can never quite reach. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing okay, Brennan. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm glad to be back from Revelstoke.
Yes.
That was a long trip. Well, you know, it was a short trip, but a long trip.
But a long trip.
It went quickly.
You were able to indoctrinate the children as effectively as possible for the mill?
Yes. Yes. Thankfully, my parole officer doesn't know that I was near kids.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so, too.
Yeah.
I will say, I really had to tap dance around the subject of religion.
Really?
Because the thing is, I don't know how sensitive people are about talking about religion.
Right.
So I wasn't sure, you know, because people, like, obviously I'm up there talking about books. I'm going to tell ghost stories.
Yeah.
But one kid asked me about demons.
Right.
And I told him I don't believe in Christian mythology. I don't believe in Christian ideology. But I said, that's me.
Right.
But it was so careful to dance around that because I just thought the last thing I need is some parent coming at me with a baseball bat going, you done shook my child's faith in the Gibbs.
But that's why you go for the whole intentionality thing, right? Like, you know, I believe there's evil in the world and different people put different labels on it and that way you get to skate over all of that sort of thing.
I tried to do that as much as possible, but there was some fancy footwork involved.
Well, I'm glad you made it through.
But yes, enough of that. We have a guest in studio.
We do.
I'm so excited about this.
One of my favorite people in the whole wide world.
Absolutely. We are here with author Barbara Smith, author of 36, soon to be 37 books.
Soon to be 37.
Probably Canada's most famous ghost author.
I would agree.
And she has bravely come into the cabin at the edge of sleep here to talk about her brand new book, Great Canadian Ghost Stories, which will be available on October 30th, I believe. No?
It's available now.
Oh, it's available now.
It's available now.
Well, there we go. Well,
it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It was already on the bestseller list.
Was it? I didn't know that.
Oh, come on.
Good, glad to hear.
Like we're not refreshing that hourly. Yeah, no, it was, absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
You heard her here. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. Lovely to be in the little cabin. Great fun. Is it haunted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's either it's haunted or everywhere we set up shop seems to be.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think at this point it's us.
It must be.
You know, they say it's like it's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
It's not the place, it's us.
Well, then I'm in my comfort zone for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the few who is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been writing ghost books now for how long?
Too long. 25 years. My first book came out in 1993, Ghost Stories of Alberta.
Yeah.
Right.
And the first print run was 1,200 copies.
Oh, wow.
Sold out in 3 weeks.
Holy smokes.
Great. That must have been so exciting.
And it was. It was fantastic. What a way to start a career.
Mm-hmm.
And that little puppy is still in print. You can still get the original Ghost Stories of Alberta. The new one, Great Canadian Ghost Stories, I've been wanting to do that book for years because you go from east to west in this huge country of ours. And the ghosts are absolutely representative of the history and the geography.
Oh.
And I just found that fascinating.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased when Touchwood picked it up.
It's great. It's a great book, and I love that it is applicable for the entire country. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have coastlines, so we have lighthouses, and there isn't a lighthouse in the world that isn't haunted.
I agree.
Sure.
Phantom ships,
Yep.
and then you go into the prairies, we have haunted houses, we have haunted museums.
Yeah.
They're just coast to coast, but they are a reflection of each place's history and geography, which I really enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm only about halfway through the book, but I just love the hell out of it.
Oh,
and that's not just me kissing ass. I actually like it because I don't tell that to everybody.
No, he doesn't.
You don't kiss ass.
No, that's it. Not unless you ask me to.
No, stop. Not in front of a guest.
I know.
I have to tell you, your book, The Ghost Stories of Alberta, that book actually, 14-year-old me,
wow.
kind of changed my life because I had spent most of my growing up years experiencing things that I was told weren't real, or I was making up, or were, just because of the religious background we had. And when I read that book, I was so comforted by it. I know it's supposed to be scary, but I found it so comforting because what I realized was my experience wasn't that weird.
Yeah.
That this was, the stories are great, but they were very much in line with the kinds of things I had experienced.
And you're not the only person that had that reaction.
Yeah.
After that book came in, I was just flooded with letters to the point that I rented a mailbox because I didn't want everyone finding a path to my door.
Yeah,
that is why.
Some of them were definitely wingnuts.
Yes.
But
I'm shocked.
We have no experience with that whatsoever.
None.
There was the one that Jesus walked through the wall and told him that his foot would be healed the next day, and it was.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't want him knowing where I lived.
No, because he might try
However-
and walk through your wall.
Yes.
You might tell Jesus where you are, though.
Oh, God, that'd be worse.
I don't know. I think Jesus liked to party. Hung out with a bunch of dudes, liked wine. This is my body.
Yeah,
Taste my body.
Okay, dial it back. Remember that whole offending religious people thing?
Yeah, that was in school. I can say whatever I want here.
But yeah, no, I'm not surprised to hear that because I think it had a profound effect. And it really was, in a way, one of the first of its genre for Canada.
It wasn't, Ian. When I was really young, I remember finding a Sheila Hervey. It's Hervey, I think she spells her name. And I think it came out in the 70s.
Oh.
And it wasn't up to the par that we expect ghost story books to be now.
Right.
But I think that might have been the pioneer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I remember reading it. I was a young married mother, and I remember just sobbing with fright over these stories and
Really?
loving
Oh, wow.
them. Just loving them.
Yeah.
There's that feeling, that deliciously frightened feeling.
Yes.
And I was getting it, and I just wouldn't.
I can't read them even now. I can't read books like that at night.
Yeah.
On my own. And if I do, I have to have another book
Yes.
that has nothing to
Yeah.
do with ghosts.
To take the
like
taste
a palate
out.
cleanser.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what keeps me going. But it's funny because do you find now, though, you read them and you're like, yeah, I can work it and do this.
Yes.
So that you don't get the same...
Your book gave me the heebie-jeebies,
you're so sweet.
especially the inn on Lochside.
Yes.
Because I had stayed there too,
And then you
that
felt-
pool area.
Yeah.
And I'm a swimmer.
Yeah.
I love to swim.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
no.
that's interesting that
Yeah.
you had that connection to it.
Yeah.
Because I find now, and I mean, maybe it's just the ghost walks or doing the ghost walks.
Right.
I can be telling the story. People are free. I had one little girl. She was like 14, and she
Okay.
started crying.
Yeah.
And I said to her mother after the story, I'm like, "Is she okay? What's wrong with her?"
Yeah.
And her mother looked at me like I was a moron, and she's like, "She's scared." Yeah. And I'm like, "Why?" I mean, I didn't say that, but then I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
right, these stories are scary."
Yes. Yes.
So I just wondered if you found yourself ever getting
Yes.
sort of jaded, but in a way,
Yeah, no, I'm
if
not
you can
jaded.
connect to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can also turn on my business head and my professional head
Right.
and write the stories.
Right.
One of my worst experiences was writing the second book, I think, More Ghost Stories of Alberta, and I was writing about a suicide.
Oh.
And it was something bad.
Right.
And interestingly, I remember the date because I'm a date freak. It was May 19th, and I was in Edmonton, and it was hot as the dickens outside, but I was in a basement office.
Right.
I had a deadline of the 25th, so I was giving her as hard as I could. But I kept getting cold. So I kept putting on more and more and more clothes. By the time my younger daughter came home, she was dressed in a halter top and shorts and looking
Right.
for a cold drink. I'm just freezing to death. And she walked into my office and she said, "Mom, it's freezing in here. Get out of here."
Oh my God.
We went to a coffee shop for a couple of hours. And when we
Holy
went
shit.
back, yeah,
Wow.
I had definitely brought something in.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, wasn't comfortable.
And I was going to say, one of the books about Alberta, you actually interviewed me for like
Yes.
20 years
yes,
ago.
I did. I used a
No way.
pseudonym.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Ian got in touch with me, and he said it was a great story to
Yeah.
a church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I had to use a pseudonym because I worked for the church. at the
Oh,
time.
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. I think I had a section called Holy Ghosts
Yeah.
like that, and it was great. And so when Ian got back in touch with me after his book was coming out, I recognized his name, even though I'd used the pseudonym.
And we hadn't spoken since then.
Yeah,
but
no.
it was, I knew. It's the same reason I talked to Brennan. I thought, hey, you've got a book out about ghosts.
Yeah.
I know literally nothing about this world, so maybe you guys can give me advice. And I was very lucky to.
Solid friendships were made.
Solid friendships and some very good advice.
Yeah.
I used yours recently at a bookstore, and I offered to sign the copies.
Oh, yes.
Because there were 3 on the shelf.
Yes.
And then they went, wait. And they went in the back and brought 15 more.
All right.
I was like, okay.
You idiots.
Right. Yeah. You can never return these.
And that's the advice that now our listeners may not know this, that if you sign a copy of a book, the bookstore cannot return it to the publisher.
Right.
No.
It's a sold book.
Yep.
You know what's interesting to me? They never asked me to prove I'm the author.
Oh,
They've never
pictures
said,
there.
show me some ID, but they don't even look.
Okay.
I could be anybody. I'm going to start doing that with some cookbooks, see what happens.
Yeah, I'm Stephen King.
Yeah. You mean Stephanie? Yeah.
Stephanie Meyer.
Don't
That's
judge
me.
me. Yeah.
I like vampires.
There was an airport store that asked me for ID when I wanted to
Really?
sign my books. And
Okay, so you did have one.
I did just turn the book around and say, see, that's me.
That's funny.
Because they thought Bin Laden was going to come in and ask to
That's
sign a bunch of books.
Well, I do have that look about me, I know. Yeah.
Very, very, very shifty.
Yeah.
Yeah. We almost beat you up in the parking lot because we thought you were coming to mug us.
Yeah.
That's right.
I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Being a great grandmother,
Yes.
you kind of give off that
Yes,
aura. Of
yes,
menace.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I
Menace
know.
and the subtle scent of
I
gingerbread,
know.
I think.
That's right. That's how they get you. They lure you in with a gingerbread and then they beat you.
Yeah, don't you know Hansel and Gretel? Yeah.
I knew it.
But it's been a good career for 25 years.
Wow.
It's supported me, and I've really, really enjoyed it. I've been places and done things, met people like you guys that I wouldn't otherwise have met at all.
Which
and
might have been
But there's
a
good
mercy.
stuff too.
Well,
Yeah. And
not
then
all bad news.
You said that this is going to be your last ghost book.
I think it will be my last ghost story
Really?
book. Yeah.
And what is causing you to sort of hang up the old ghost hat?
Just enough.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm old. It's time. I'd like to see what retirement is like. I'd like to write my memoirs. I'd like to try some fiction.
Yeah.
I've written a bit of fiction with fireside stories and campfire stories. So,
Nice. That's great.
yeah, I just hand the mantle over to you, to next generation.
Oh, boy.
This is like that whole shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations thing, you know? Here is my empire.
Terrific.
And I'm the ne'er-do-well son.
That's right.
Oh, hitting my head against the wall, stinking to gin.
I'm investing in completely unsuitable Hollywood movies with all the money.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
no.
Extravaganza 3.
You cannot say that.
I really can. That's right. Cut. There's just going to be a bunch of edits. Right?
Yeah, it's
Come
gonna,
back. Penis. No.
it's just gonna end up with just Barbara talking. That's gonna be like she's talking to
better
the
get
air.
interesting.
A Barbara Smith monologue moment.
Waited my whole life.
Yeah, finally.
Then she starts doing it.
Yeah.
Boners.
I need a drink.
So, how long does it take for you? I mean, have you this sort of been working towards this 4 years? You know, like collecting stories.
This Great Canadian Ghost Stories definitely has
Yep.
been in the back of my head for years.
Right.
I've written most of Canada, and I have written one called Canadian Ghost Stories, and it's one of my least favorite books.
Really?
I just don't like it.
And why is that?
There's nothing personal about it.
Right.
And this one I felt I was able to get more in depth and tie to the history, and it just has a different feel to it, and I'm really, really pleased with this one.
Yeah.
I've been pleased with my individual ones. Ghost Stories of Manitoba is one of my favorite books.
Really?
And Manitoba has been, the people of Manitoba have been so, so good to me.
Yeah.
Just some books I've felt more kinship.
Yeah.
With.
More personality to them kind of thing.
Yeah. I had a blast doing. I've got Ghost Stories of Hollywood, and I had a great time doing that. So they asked me to do Ghost Stories of California, And again, there just seemed to be a distance between me and the material.
Interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't connect with any of it.
And so you said you got a little more into the history with Great Canadian?
I did, because I thought it was appropriate. The oldest European, I have stuck to the post-European contact stories.
Right.
And the oldest one I could get was a ghost of Henry Hudson from the 1600s.
Holy
And
cats.
this was published in the Winnipeg Free Press. An article that had been written 250 years earlier was found, and it was a recounting of seeing the ghost of Henry Hudson.
That's amazing.
I thought that was a cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I love
that.
social history. So
do I.
Yeah.
I mean, that
wherever.
was a big part of my book and Brennan's book.
Yes.
It's the history
Yes.
wrapped up with the ghost story,
Yeah.
and I think most people can attach themselves to that
Yeah.
in a deeper way.
Yeah, you have more context then.
You do. Yeah, for sure.
With Brennan's especially being one place, like that's heavy.
Yeah. Very sort of deep connection there.
Yes.
So in terms of researching this, did you spend a lot of time combing through old newspapers and things like this? Oh,
yes,
okay, interesting.
Yes. A friend of mine actually has a microfilm reader, and
Right.
I'm envious.
Yeah.
What kind of a nerd says that?
Yeah.
But all the newspapers are available online now, so that helps a lot.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Plus, having written so many ghost story
You know
books,
what to look for.
Know what to look for. People send you leads.
Right.
All you have to do is go out and follow them up and document them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's sort of half author, half reporter.
Yes. Yeah, it is a bit.
And
It
some
is a bit.
historian thrown in for good measure.
Yeah. And even a
that's neat.
geographer every now and then. Yeah, I had a good time doing it. It was, I guess, about a year until it was produced. So that's pretty good.
That is good.
Yeah.
That's a great turnaround.
One of my records is Ghost Stories of the Sea, which is also still selling well, and I really like that book. 6 weeks from beginning to end.
Oh,
Wow.
I didn't do anything else. My kids were grown by that time, and all I did was work like 40 hours a day writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write yours again?
Like 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
were
beat
quick.
me. You beat me.
But you were quick.
Well, the stories were already there. It wasn't.
Well-
it really wasn't a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to write out my own stories that
Yes.
I experienced.
Yes.
But pretty much all the stories I used, I think, except for one, we were already telling on the ghost tour.
Okay.
So it was a matter of
You tell
getting them
so
down,
well.
putting them together.
Yeah.
Putting my own spin on them, my own impressions of them. So it didn't take very long, but. I
Yeah.
could have done more research. I found out afterwards from Brennan.
No. You mean you could have done some research? Any research?
I did do some research. How dare you?
You're telling ghost stories,
Yeah,
for goodness sakes.
exactly. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be fun and entertaining.
Yes.
They can still, we just discussed, they can have historical context and still be entertaining.
Historical
You lazy
context,
bastard.
but they don't have to be obsessively correct.
I know.
Because then you kill the essence of a good story.
So I thought maybe we'd just talk about one or two of the stories from the book, because there was, as I said, I'm about halfway through it, and
Okay.
I'm at the point now where most of this stuff doesn't really affect me.
Right.
I'm into it, but I don't,
Yeah.
But there was actually a couple stories that gave me chills.
Oh, good.
And I was reading it in McDonald's at midnight.
That should give you chills.
Oh, that's just the hypertension. That's fine. So the one that the first one that really caught me was the haunted light from the Northumberland Strait.
The haunted light.
The lighthouse, yeah, and that one was, it's such a classic ghost story, but it's so effective.
Well, I don't think there is a lighthouse in the world that doesn't have a ghost, quite
I'd agree
frankly.
with that. Yeah.
But the West Point Lighthouse in Northumberland Strait in the Canadian Maritimes is now a restaurant and a bed and breakfast.
Oh, really?
Cool.
And so it's still operating as a light,
Right.
and the light still functions, but at the end of the day, at the end of the night, when the restaurant closes, the staff leaves. And of course, turn down all the lights, turn them off, and off they go. And they get back out to their cars, look back at the lighthouse, and the lights are on.
Right.
So they go back in and turn the light off again, and go back out to their car, turn their car around, look at the light, and the lights are on
Oh,
again.
man.
And the one woman, she said, yeah, that's enough. If he wants the lights on,
Yeah.
we'll leave his
Yeah,
lights
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But that lighthouse is a couple hundred years old, and while it was manned, there were only 2 lighthouse keepers through the whole life of it.
Oh, gosh.
So these men were obviously extremely dedicated to
Yeah.
the light, and no wonder.
Yeah.
Their spirits have stayed behind.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that story.
I stayed in a haunted lighthouse off the coast of Oregon.
Did you?
Really?
Yeah, it's the house, the old lighthouse house, is now a bed and breakfast, and then the light is just a little
Just
pathway
away.
down, and yeah, all kinds of stories about it being haunted.
Was that Hector?
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really neat. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Did you have much in the way of any kind of vibe there?
Yeah, I definitely felt a vibe, but nothing, no
Yeah.
door slamming or specters appearing, which, quite frankly, I'm grateful for.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So, but it was a definite, you felt that you were in someone else's home.
Okay.
Right.
And there was somebody
Yep.
else still there.
Yep.
And I read a book about lighthouses, Lights of the Western Coastline,
Yeah.
Canadian coastline. And oh my God, the tragedy these guys went through.
Yes.
And their families and what
Yes.
they sacrificed.
Yes.
And how poorly they were treated.
No
and most of
wonder.
the time they either ended up insane from the isolation.
Oh, of course.
Or with unbelievable destructive arthritis from the mercury that had to be filtered every
of
week.
course.
Because that's what the lights sat on, was a big vat of
Jesus,
mercury.
I had no idea.
Yes.
So they either went crazy
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
their joints were just
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
In one case, a man he had been down with it for at least 7 or 8 years.
Right.
And his wife had run the light.
Oh,
That's all she'd done was run the light. And
jeez.
he stayed in bed. He died. And she said to the lighthouse people, hey,
Yeah.
look, I've been doing this for 8 years. Can I keep doing it? And they're like,
Yeah.
no women lighthouse keepers. You're out.
What?
And they kicked her out.
Jesus.
She had no home, no money, no nothing.
Because
and
there's a
now
bunch of people
support.
beating down the door to be a lighthouse keeper.
Yeah, not.
Well, this is the irony. There was, because in Ottawa, of course, where it was all taken care of, it was seen as quite a plum appointment. You sat around doing nothing, and they
Supposedly.
paid you.
Yeah.
Which was not what
No.
it was at all.
No.
It was this 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
constant struggle.
Yeah.
They couldn't grow any food. They didn't get paid enough. They had to, if they wanted an assistant to help them, they had to pay for it out of their wages.
Ooh.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and there was never enough food or anything.
Yeah.
It was an awful, awful
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But in Ottawa, they thought, "Oh, this is a great,
Yeah.
Plum
great
gig,
gig."
Yeah.
of course.
It
Fishy.
wasn't. So it was a
No.
great book to see the different kind of
Yeah.
levels and the insight you get into the history of these lighthouses. And I
Awful.
agree with you.
Yeah.
It is not a shock
No.
that these places are
No,
haunted.
no,
because
those-
these people had to pour their
Those
lives into it.
keepers were, yes, absolutely. Their heart and soul.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about drowned towns.
I did. I
So
did.
tell us a little bit about that.
Many, many years ago in the 50s, the St. Lawrence River was going to be converted to become the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Right.
But there were a bunch of little towns on the shore of the St. Lawrence River that would be flooded when the seaway, when the dams were open and the
Yeah,
seaway
yeah.
became. And so they moved these people from these little towns, and they got to move their house if they wanted to, or build a new one if they wanted to. But in the end, there were some buildings just left standing.
Right.
The old bank building, who cares? Just leave it there. So there were, 15, 20 buildings that ended up being flooded when the seaway became the seaway. So this area by now is a scuba diver's paradise
Of course, yeah.
because there are all these old buildings to explore, submerged old buildings, and people have seen lights on in those buildings.
Wow.
They've seen
Holy
shadowy
man.
figures in these buildings, and I think there are scuba divers who've never strapped on the tanks again after going down there.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that's
That would be disturbing.
Yeah, especially underwater. 'cause
Underwater,
you're already
yeah.
isolated and completely out of your element.
Yeah.
And it's dark.
And it's
Yeah.
dark.
No matter what's going
Yeah.
on outside, it's
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah, and then you see that.
Yeah.
The
Oh.
light, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's
That's
a
a
bit
nightmare.
like the story of the Frank Slide. I mean, submerged in
Yes.
a different way.
Yes.
Oh, of
But
course,
there
yeah,
are
yeah,
still stories
Yes.
about hearing the church bell ringing and
Oh,
hearing
yeah.
Right.
the sounds of children
Yeah,
and all that sort of
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
And I know in my own book, A Strange Little Place, available everywhere fine books are sold.
Oh my God.
I've got a story from one of the drowned towns south of Revelstoke.
Right.
Because there was Beaton, Burton, Sidmouth, all those
Yes,
towns when they
yeah,
dammed up the
quite a
Columbia in
few.
the 60s.
Yeah.
And there was a group of campers who heard music.
Oh wow.
Oh my
Their
gosh.
dogs went nuts. and seemed to be barking at something in the trees.
Yeah.
And then a moment or two later, they heard what sounded like piano coming from somewhere.
Lord.
And they were off in the sticks. And then it was gone, and the dogs went back to normal. But yeah, all down
The
there.
late 50s, early 60s, it was just a weird time. It's just post-war, things were really rolling, but
Right.
there was the sense that human beings could overtake everything. And
Yes.
think of the phrase "drowned towns."
Yeah.
What a dreadful thing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Of course,
You know,
absolutely.
that's violent.
It's almost like nature pushed back.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Wow.
I sometimes wondered if sort of the uptick we've seen in this kind of stuff, in paranormal stuff, is a result of that.
Of
Is sort
nature pushing back.
Nature pushing back.
Yeah.
You know, if we're sort of seeing a kind of, like a response.
Yeah, no,
You know,
that makes sense.
Interesting.
I mean, before the show, we talked a little bit about Revelstoke being,
Yeah.
on my trip, being really dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that's something to do with it. If nature is just pushing in further.
Pushing
had
back.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
funny enough, I was talking to Stephen Rachel about this, and they said the same thing.
Really?
So it's on people's minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
I could see that.
Not a
Well,
very
we're
comforting thought.
also interconnected, whether we want to be or not.
Oh,
But,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a mistake we make. We think we're
Yeah.
above the natural order.
Yeah,
when
no,
we are most certainly
no.
not.
No,
Yeah,
we're part.
that's a
Yeah.
horrifying thought. I was just flicking through your book here, and I see you mentioned Tranquille in Kamloops.
Yes.
Now, that is a fascinating place.
Yes,
Have-
it certainly is. That Tranquille is right in there with the old hospitals from Saskatchewan, the
Oh, okay.
Weyburn and Fort San.
Right.
They're same sort of thing. Former hospitals just alive with energy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They are doing, we talked about this on episode 18, actually,
Yeah.
The City by the Lake.
I can't believe
Right.
you remember the number of what episode.
Number
it is.
freak.
It's almost like I'm the one who has to organize all this crap.
Or you're a little bit autistic. Either way.
Yeah, there's
it's good.
that too. That
Either
too.
way,
I
it's
think that's
good.
fair.
Yeah.
But they're doing tours of Tranquille now.
Oh, they're doing it.
Oh my
Again.
goodness.
Yeah,
I
and
wanna go.
I think they're actually
Amazing.
year round now,
Really?
and they've refined them a bit more.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
So I went
Yeah,
last
of
year,
course.
and it's just fascinating because I feel like the strongest thing in Tranquille is the land wants you to go.
Okay.
Because new investors bought the property several years ago, and
Yeah.
they've poured millions of dollars
Yeah.
into trying to revitalize the area.
Nothing.
And now they're looking for outside investment because they just can't kind of make it fly on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the land wants to be left alone. That's what it feels like to me. It feels
you can
sad.
understand that. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. It just feels sad
Mm-hmm.
and done.
Well, and the most
Yeah.
haunted places in my experience have been schools,
Yeah.
hospitals, hotels,
Yeah.
and theaters.
Right.
And it's where there's a lot of energy,
Yes.
a lot of transition,
Yeah.
a lot where there's a lot of public
Yeah.
movement, but like especially theaters, hospitals.
Theaters, I've got a whole book
Yeah.
haunted theaters.
Yeah.
If you think about what a theater is, the audience is going in there
Yeah.
to suspend their disbelief
Right.
and watch other people pretend to be something
Yeah.
else.
And the energy in that.
Yes.
The amount of energy
Oh,
you
yes.
give as a
Yeah.
performer.
Yeah.
And then the energy you're giving back as an audience member.
Right.
The applause, the paying attention, all of these
Yes.
sorts of
Oh,
things.
yeah, yeah.
So I know here in Victoria, the McPherson of the Royal are
Yeah.
deeply haunted.
Yes.
And it's really not a shock.
Yeah,
you
no,
know, but given
no.
how that is. And the whole thing about ghost lights. You know,
Yes.
as part of the tradition in
Yes.
theaters. And I mean, that's
Yes.
fascinating to me.
Love the ghost
yeah,
light.
yeah. But the hospitals here in town, we have the Jubilee.
Yes.
And I've heard from, I'd say at least 4 or 5 different people. Some are guards, some are
Okay,
nurses, some
yeah.
are doctors. The Jubilee, the old part of the Jubilee,
Yeah.
nobody wants to go
Yeah.
in there.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was in there one night, oddly enough, for a sleep study.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't
No.
sleep one wink.
No.
At 7:00 in the morning, I went downstairs to Timmy's, got myself a large coffee,
Got
and
the
left.
heck out.
Yeah.
I know. It's
Yeah,
a
very
disturbing
uncomfortable.
place.
There's St. Michael's in Lethbridge, and it was very haunted by a nun, a former nun.
Okay, yeah.
And she used to sit with the patients through the night.
Right.
And people would ask for her. Yeah, that is
Wow.
the lovely nun going to sit with me again tonight?
That's
And- Yeah,
amazing.
and then they tore that hospital down, but I heard from one of the nurses, she's still there. She went
Really?
with them. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's a bit like those, I just read a story about a cat in an old people's home. They brought in 4 cats.
Oh, neat.
And these 4 cats are supposed to be there to be all cuddly and
Sure.
lovey with the residents.
Right.
And 3 of them are.
Yeah,
But the 4th one has never
Not so
been a
much.
cuddle cat.
you're right.
But the night someone's going to go, He goes in.
Oh, goosebumps.
He lies on their bed.
Yep.
And he waits.
Oh,
and
wow.
he has
Goosebumps.
never been wrong. They interviewed the director of the home, and he said, we've had 34 instances of this cat
Wow.
identifying, and he's never been wrong.
Oh, my gosh.
So maybe he's there for a different reason.
Now, you asked me if the ghost stories still get to me. Yeah, that did.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of an amazing
Yeah.
story, actually.
Somehow the bed, too. I've had people tell me that they felt something sitting on the bed,
Yeah.
and when they looked up, there was an impression on the bed that
Of a
somebody,
person?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that happened in our old place. I think I've talked about that
Yeah,
before.
that's right.
Nikki came out and said, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was about midnight. I was doing some writing. And I said, well, I've been out here the whole time. Why? And she said, well, you came in, sat on the bed, then you got up again.
Oh my gosh, no, you
Nope,
didn't.
I
And
had
you're like,
not.
no,
Nope.
I've been here the whole time. And then did she remain with you? Or did she just go back to bed?
She's a hell of a lot tougher than I am. She just went right back to sleep.
What a
Wow.
woman.
But I mean, she saw something once, and again, I'm sure I've mentioned this on the show, but she once saw something when I was away. She was in the bathroom late at night, got up to use the bathroom, and
Yeah.
she saw a shadow cross
Oh,
underneath the door. And she opened the door was locked. We're on the third floor. She
Yeah.
was the only person there.
Wow.
wow.
But that building was,
Yeah.
it had something that came through, and the one next to it was a lot worse. The one next to it, the
That's
president.
some consolation.
Yeah.
The one next door is worse.
This one's haunted,
Yeah.
but next door is way worse.
So earlier you mentioned haunted hotels. Do you have an example? Something maybe like a sort of a famous Canadian hotel that people know to be haunted?
I have a classic, Brennan. The Banff Springs Hotel. And
Oh, of course.
personally, this is so intriguing because when I was first collecting Alberta ghost stories, the Banff Springs Hotel was owned by the Fairmont chain, and they have a blanket policy that their hotels are not haunted.
That's
Oh,
right.
of course.
They do. Yeah.
Yep, never heard of such a thing. Well, when I started re-researching some of the stories for this book, I phoned them, and the promo department was delighted to hear from me.
Wow.
They were having their ghost walk, and they now thoroughly enjoy the fact that they're
Oh, wow.
hosted. Well, it's a lot easier when you are actually haunted to admit that you're haunted.
Sure, yeah.
If people are seeing ghosts,
Yeah.
and there are some classics from that place. There's a little girl in a hallway who bounces a red ball and is dressed in a white pinafore, and she goes down the hallway and disappears in through the wall. And
Interesting.
that's the last you see of her. The Dancing Bride is probably the most famous ghost story in Canada, and that takes place in the Rob Roy room in the Banff Springs Hotel, which I must say is the most extraordinarily luxurious hotel in the entire world. It's just gorgeous, and so what a beautiful place for a setting for a wedding.
Yeah.
And it was back in the early days, early 1900s, I gather, and the staircase, the rounded staircase from the second floor down to where the marriage was going to take place, they lit it with little tea lights, candles,
yeah.
with each step. And as the bride came down the stairs, she only got a few stairs down, and her train, got upset one of the candles. Her train started on fire.
Oh, my God.
Panicked, understandably, and fell to her death.
Oh, Jesus.
Terrible story. But her image is seen at the bottom of the staircase, and it's a white vaporous image, and she seems to be dancing. So people, to console themselves, I think,
Yeah.
have said that she's dancing the wedding waltz that was taken from her by death.
Wow.
Yikes.
And the other really active ghost at the Banff Springs Hotel is Sam Macaulay. He was a Scotsman who came to Canada in the 50s, went right to work at the Banff Springs Hotel as a bellhop. And he worked there for his entire career, and he always said when he died he was going to come back and haunt the place, and he's kept his promise.
Really?
He's seen in his very distinctive Scottish uniform, and he speaks with a brogue. And in the 1970s, he actually helped a family into their suite when they checked in late at night.
That's amazing.
The family was exhausted. Getting to Banff had been a real trial, so they just flopped into bed, and the next morning the man realized, I didn't even tip the bellhop. I'd better go down to the front desk. He was so nice, and it was so late at night. And so he asked the front desk clerk who the bellhop was, the elderly man with the Scottish brogue. And the clerk said, we don't have any bellhops here over the age of 30.
Right.
And the guy said, yeah, you do, because he helped me last night. And the clerk said, well, what was this guy, what did he look like? And the customer described Sam Macaulay to a T.
Wow.
So there's interconnectedness
That's very
between,
cool.
yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Wow.
It's also rumored that he hid a lot of his tips somewhere in the Banff Springs hotel, and then he's come back to keep an eye over them. But I have seen elevators there that go down and up, and doors open, and no one's anywhere near them.
Wow.
So yeah,
Interesting.
it's
Pardon me, I can't remember if it's the Banff Springs or somewhere in Lake Louise, but I spoke to people who worked there, and they said that the elevator will stop while you're in it.
oh
And in order to get it to go again, you
Yeah.
have to say, come on, I can't remember the name of the thing. I want to say Andrew, but I don't think that's right.
oh my
But you have to say,
goodness.
come on, stop
Yeah,
laying around.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
it'll start again. But if
Yeah.
if you stand there and you don't say anything, you will
You'll
stay
just
there.
be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you
Wow.
are again. The electrics,
Yeah.
electronics, the source of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
100%. Moving water and
Yes.
electronics.
Again, moving water.
Yeah. They seem to be a real source of power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the Banff Springs Hotel, is that a former CPR hotel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, and
The-
that's, so
Like
it's
the
on,
Empress
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
Chateau
yeah, yeah.
Frontenac.
Yeah.
and-
so along the railroad, and that also seems to be
Yes.
Yes.
an indication that there is a greater chance for something going on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Canada has lots of phantom trains too.
Oh, do we?
Yeah. The Saskatchewan, the St. Louis train, it's been seen for decades.
Really?
And you can just see the light off in the distance, and
Yeah.
it approaches, and as it approaches, it dims. People have tried every kind of scientific experiment to try and exclude everything they can, and I've spoken to people who have seen the light,
Right.
and they say it's undeniably a train light, the oscillating
Interesting.
train light. Yeah.
Huh.
So now you've done your last ghost book.
Yes.
Are you done writing books completely?
I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
good.
not.
Oh,
no,
good.
I'm not. I'm selfishly working on a memoir right now.
Fantastic.
Which I
That's
think
wonderful.
will be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a bizarre life, so
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's worth recording. Whether it ever sees the light of day, my family will have it anyway.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of books of short stories that I'd like to write.
Nice.
Fantastic.
I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So I'm just, it's good to be away from the deadlines.
Sure.
Most of my deadlines were self-imposed, but they were there.
Yeah.
course.
And yeah,
So is that your idea of retirement? Just no
Yes.
deadlines?
Yes, yes, that's exactly it.
I love it.
Yeah, so see, I don't even have to guarantee I won't write another ghost story book. I
No,
just
you don't, because
want
you
deadlines.
just might.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, I've always worked to really tight deadlines, and it's
Right.
nice to be out from under that pressure.
Good.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Great.
So now you've got a couple events coming up.
I do, yes. The launch for Great Canadian Ghost Stories is happening on Tuesday, October 23rd at Bolin Books in Hillside Mall in Victoria. If anyone can make it, that would be terrific.
I'm doing the introduction.
Yay. And yeah, CBC Radio, I have the face
Right.
for radio, and I'm going to do her.
That's why you're on a podcast with us.
On, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'll be on noon on CBC Radio in Victoria, and I'm doing a taped interview, and I guess they'll play that on the 31st also.
Excellent.
So happy Halloween, everyone.
Yeah.
And you have a signing at Coles out in Langford as well, I believe.
do, yes, a week, Saturday the 27th.
Okay,
Yeah,
and-
Coles Langford.
Is that 12 to 2?
12 to 2.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Barbara. This
Yeah.
has been a ton of fun.
Thank you to both of you. It's been great.
And we have a musical guest we're going to go out on this episode.
'Kay.
This is the second track we're debuting this month from The Abyss.
Oh, yes.
Their upcoming album, Centurion, will be out on October 30th. You'll be able to find that at radioabyss.bandcamp.com. The song is Hearts on Fire. It's my favorite track from that album, and that'll be coming up next. You can find Barbara's book, Great Canadian Ghost Stories, on Amazon, Chapters, pretty much everywhere fine books are sold.
Yeah, literally.
Literally, especially around Victoria. If you're in Victoria, you will find them everywhere.
Yeah.
But if you're out of the country, you're elsewhere, you'll be able to get it on Amazon, no problem. And
right.
make sure to get to those signing events if you want to have them signed.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have mine signed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Barbara.
We'll be back next week with our Halloween episode. And until then...
I had to do that. It's
of course you did.
kind of a thing.
Until then, into the darkness we go.
I know.
That's right.
Just
Yeah.
a little
But
baby.
we buy 35.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Take this, my heart.
Yeah,
Let's see
exactly.
you deal with this liver. You bastard.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that
Okay.
better?
That's way better. Yeah,
A, B, C,
perfect.
D.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Perfect.
Okay.
And again, it's not live. So
Right.
you want to take a break?
Right.
Whatever.
Okay.
And we
And-
say horrific things
Okay.
that never makes a show. We do have an outtakes
Oh,
section.
fun.
So yeah, there could be that on there.
You're going to need the break because of the stool.
It's all right. I stand and walk around for 5 hours.
Yeah, but you
Yeah,
don't bend
true.
your neck like this.
Well, I'm not.
Well, I mean, most of the time.
I, wow.
Didn't hear you. Have a drink.
That's right.
Not for less than 50 bucks.
It's a chaser.
You're right. Spew water all over the studio.
Yeah.
Okay, I care
Oh,
deeply.
yes.
He does care deeply.
But, yeah, but that's fine. There's only so much we can do.
You care far more than you're willing to admit.
Yeah, exactly. Shut up, your mouth.
Okay.
It's all a defense.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm deep inside. I'm soft and vulnerable, and I just want a hug, but no one will love me.
Nope.
Poor
Not,
baby.
that's not the response I was hoping for.
Yeah,
But,
sorry.
Not with that laugh. See?
Oh,
Yes,
I thought you
you
meant
would.
you changed
Yeah.
your name.
no,
I'm like,
no. Yeah, my
you
real life.
changed it to Storr?
It was Fuckmaster before, but
Says.
to my dear friend.
Yeah,
Yes.
no.
Testing. This fucking thing. I hate this board.
All right. Let's get down to it.
Yes, sir.